Hi guys, tonight we begin something a little slipperier than usual. You're born not in a palace of clouds, not to a chorus of divine heralds, but deep in the folds of a quiet mountain cave. The air is damp and more sweet, and the only sound greeting your arrival is the rhythmic breath of your exhausted mother, Maya, one of the quieter Pleiades. You are small, not in power, but in stature compact, wriggling, and already impossibly alert. Most infants cry. You, however, observe. Most newborns lie still. You test your limbs as if calculating how quickly you could crawl out into the world and cause a little chaos. There's something in your expression that doesn't belong on a face, so no a kind of amused calculation. You are barely hours old, and already your mind turns toward mischief. Outside the cave, the world hums with the gentle sounds of morning dew slipping from fern tips, lizards rustling under leaves, the far-off chant of wind combing through pine. But you don't wait for life to happen to you. As soon as Maya's eyelids droop with fatigue, you wriggle from your swaddling, plant your bare feet on the stone floor, and begin your first act of rebellion. No fanfare, no hesitation. You simply go. The world hasn't been warned, and that's exactly how you prefer it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're here together, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing where you all drift off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey takes you across meadows still steaming with sunlit fog, down goat paths, and through whispering grasses. You walk as if you've done this before, as if being brand new to existence were just a minor technicality. Along the way, you encounter a tortoise applauding, ancient creature chewing a mushroom without a care. Where another might see a curiosity of nature, you see an opportunity. With a flicker of thought and barely a blink of remorse, you end its slow life and carve the shell into something else. You stretch gut string across the hollowed dome and pluck the first note from what will become the lyre. The sound is both strange and lovely, like laughter behind a locked door. You smile not because it's beautiful, but because it's yours. You haven't just taken something from the world, you've changed it. But this, oddly, is not your main act of the day, because on this first day of breath and movement, you decide, with the casual confidence of someone who doesn't believe in consequences, to steal Apollo's cattle. Not just one or two, a full herd of 50. Apollo, the golden son of Zeus, lord of the sun, the law, and all things orderly. You choose his property deliberately, with a flair for danger that seems wildly inappropriate for a creature still slick from the womb. You reverse their hooves using clever bindings so that their tracks lead in the wrong direction. You wear woven bark on your feet to leave no prints of your own. You guide the cattle through streams and across rock beds, hiding your trail like a seasoned thief. You're not just committing theft, you're choreographing an illusion. When you finally herd the cattle into a cave and block the entrance with brush and bramble, you don't celebrate. You return to your own cradle and lie back down, curling your fingers around your blanket and closing your eyes. You even hum softly to yourself as Maya re-enters the cave, none the wiser. Outside, the sun is rising higher, and Apollo is beginning to notice that something of his is missing. Now, imagine his face when he realizes that someone has made a fool of him not with brute force, but with finesse. He, the god of prophecy and light, follows the trails, only to find deception in every footprint. The cattle seem to have walked backwards, the ground offers no clues, and the sun, his own domain, has given him no insight. His anger builds not just from loss, but from confusion. For a god like Apollo, being tricked is a greater offense than being robbed. Eventually, his pursuit leads him to your cave. He storms in, sunlit and blinding, expecting a criminal, a rival, a mortal with a death wish. What he finds is you, an infant, lying in a cradle, swaddled and suspiciously still. He demands answers. Maya wakes in alarm. You open your eyes, blink with exaggerated innocence, and yawn like you've just awoken from a particularly nice nap. You don't speak, not really. You offer no direct confession. Instead, you stretch out your hands and pluck a few notes on the lyre you made earlier. Music flows through the cave, curling around Apollo's anger like a cool breeze. And that's when something changes, because Apollo, despite his rage, is not immune to beauty. He hears the melody, sees the gleam in your eye, and something inside him softens. You've created something original, something divine. He doesn't forgive you, exactly, but he does pause. And in that pause, you slide in a deal. You offer him the lyre in exchange for peace. It's not just a trade of objects, it's a trade of power. You've stolen from a god and come away not with punishment, but with approval. When Zeus hears of this, instead of scolding you, he laughs. Deep, booming, and with the pride of a father who sees himself reflected in your defiance. He doesn't punish you either. Instead, he appoints you to Olympus, not as a ward to be watched, but as a messenger, a diplomat, a bringer of dreams and secrets. You've turned a crime into a job promotion. By the end of your first day, you are no longer just a child of Maia. You are Hermes, god of travelers, thieves, merchants, and messengers. And the world, for better or worse, has started spinning a little differently around you. You begin your second day not with sleep, but with anticipation. The air on Mount Selene feels different now, like the mountain itself is whispering about you. You are no longer a secret in the shadows. You are a presence, a ripple, and the gods have noticed. Zeus may have granted you the title of messenger, but what he truly offered was an invitation into the tangled politics of Olympus. It is a realm of power, yes, but also of performance where words can mean three things at once, and favors are worth more than gold. You make your first official journey up the skyward paths, climbing not with effort, but with expectation. The landscape shifts beneath your feet, clouds becoming solid, columns rising from mist, the scent of ambrosia threading through the air like a ribbon. Olympus is not a palace in the human sense. It is mood and movement, shaped by a divine will. Towers gleam not from sunlight, but from reputation. And as you pass by statues that breathe and gardens that bloom in rhythm with song, you realize you're entering a world that runs on spectacle. You belong here not because you were born to it, but because you know how to play the game. Your first task is humble in appearance. Deliver a message to Iris, the rainbow-gilded courier of Hera. It sounds simple, almost like a test of obedience. But Olympus never does anything without layers. You find her standing beside a reflecting pool, her feet barely skimming the surface, as if the laws of gravity defer to her grace. Her eyes flick to you the moment you approach, not with suspicion, but with calculation. She already knows who you are. She's heard the stories. She gestures for the message, and you hand it over with a practiced smirk. But before she turns away, she pauses. "You'll need more than charm to last up here," she says. Not unkindly, you nod, storing the lesson. Because you already understand, Olympus doesn't care how clever you were yesterday. You must be clever again, and again, and again. You return to Zeus, not to report success, but because he summoned you. You find him reclining on a throne of stormlight and marble, lightning pulsing faintly beneath his skin, a heartbeat. He regards you not as a child, not even as a servant, but as something unfinished and potentially dangerous. This time, he doesn't laugh. He speaks low and deliberate. "There are things you will carry for me that are not messages," he says. "Secrets, warnings, weapons. You say nothing, but your mind races. This is no longer play. This is diplomacy edged in shadow." Zeus continues, "Your next errand is to retrieve something not for me, but for time itself." The phrasing is strange, even for Olympus. But you do not question it. That would imply you weren't already thinking 10 steps ahead. You descend the mountain again. This time not as a curious wanderer, but as something faster. Your new sandals, gifts from Hephaestus himself, shimmer at your heels with potential energy. They do not fly exactly, They cheat space in increments, like thoughts skipping across the surface of water. You reach your destination, a quiet valley near the cave of dreams, faster than most gods can name it. There, you encounter your first true obstacle. Hypnos, god of sleep. He reclines among shadows that yawn wider than they should, his body half submerged in mist. His hair flows like smoke, his voice barely audible beneath the hum of dreams. He is not hostile, but he is disinterested, which is worse. To get what you need, you must outmaneuver not a weapon, but a mind that doesn't care to move. You approach carefully, letting your voice match the rhythm of the wind in the leaves. You do not flatter him, nor beg, you engage. You offer something he cannot resist, novelty. A story he hasn't heard, a secret you hint at, but do not reveal. And as his eyes narrow, with the slow flicker of curiosity, you slip past into the deeper chambers of slumber, where time becomes soft and dreams become keys. There, you find Chronos, not the Titan, but the abstract fragment of time itself, flickering between form and idea. You do not speak, you listen, you wait, and then you take what you came for, a single droplet of condensed memory, wrapped in starlight and forgetfulness. Zeus didn't tell you what it was for, and you don't ask. You're learning. As you return, you feel something shift. The wind moves differently, the clouds above Olympus shimmer with watchfulness. You are no longer the amusing thief of yesterday. You have become something else entirely, a courier of consequence. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever truly served Zeus with loyalty, or merely with convenience. But if they could see you now moving between realms with a calm face and a pocket full of paradox, they might hesitate to define you at all. And that's the way you prefer it. You begin to realize, in the days that follow, that Olympus is not a kingdom, it's a stage. The gods, for all their grandeur, are performers as much as they are powers. Every thunderclap from Zeus, every radiant sunrise from Apollo, every rustle of Athena's war cloak is calculated. Nothing is accidental. Even the chaos of Dionysus has choreography hidden beneath its wild rhythms. You watch this divine theater unfold, and you learn quickly that your role as Hermes is not merely to serve or to fly. It is to move between conversations, between alliances, between truths. You're becoming fluent in subtext. You smile with your mouth and plot with your silence. Your first major test comes in the form of a dinner. Not a feast of celebration or worship, but a quiet gathering of select deities. Hestia tends the hearth. Hera selects the seating, and Zeus pretends not to oversee the entire affair. You're invited not because they trust you, but because they're watching. Every gesture matters. You are placed between Athena and Ares, a deliberate choice. On one side, reason sharpened like a blade. On the other, pure temper waiting for an excuse to ignite. You manage to make polite conversation with both without committing to either. It's a balancing act, and you pull it off so smoothly that even Hera raises an eyebrow. As the evening wears on, the topic of mortals arises. They always do. The gods love speaking of humanity in tones both amused and resentful. You listen as Apollo complains that humans distort his prophecies with bad poetry, while Demeter sighs that they forget to plant in season. When the conversation turns to the strange mortal king Sisyphus and his cleverness, you suppress a grin. You've met him, briefly. He tried to outwit Thanatos, and almost succeeded. You're not supposed to admire that, but you do, quietly. Later that night, as the fire dims and the wine deepens, Zeus pulls you aside. There's a look in his eye you've seen before, strategic, distant, heavy with implication. You'll deliver something from me, he says. Not a message this time, a whisper, a piece of divine favor wrapped in a warning. He hands you a coin plain, unmarked, but warm to the touch. It's for Hades, he says simply. You don't ask questions, not because you aren't curious, but because you understand that some doors only open when you don't knock. You pocket the coin and descend, not through the mortal realm, but along the folds of reality that open only to gods who know where to tug. The underworld is not dark the way mortals expect. It's not black or smoky or drenched in fire. It is quiet, too quiet. The silence there presses in like fog, muffling your thoughts, slowing your steps. You pass fields of asphodel, where souls murmur not with sadness, but with indifference. They're not screaming, they're simply done. You find Hades near the banks of the Styx, his back turned, as if he already knows you're there. He is not like his brothers. He does not command the sky or the seas. He commands the end of things, the stillness that follows. When he turns, he doesn't smile, but he nods, and in the language of gods, that is enough. You hand him the coin. He weighs it in his palm, then closes his fist around it. Zeus still plays games, he says. Not with venom, with weariness. You say nothing. You're beginning to understand that in the realm of eternity, words become a kind of burden. But before you leave, Hades looks at you with something sharper. You walk freely between worlds, he murmurs, be careful. Too much motion, and you forget which world you belong to. It's not a threat. It's a warning. You return to Olympus just as the sky shifts into dawn. The other gods are still at rest, their dreams wrapped in illusions of power and memory. You do not sleep. You pace, you think. Because you've just realized that your gift movement, passage, boundary comes with a cost. Historians still debate the true relationship between Hermes and Hades. Some believe they were allies in function only, bonded by necessity. Others suggest a deeper kinship to gods who understood that their roles were not glamorous, but essential. One delivered souls to the underworld, the other ruled them. Both kept secrets no one else could bear. As you stand now on the marble edge of Olympus, watching the sun rise in pieces through the clouds, you feel the weight of both worlds pressing on your shoulders. You carry words, yes, but you also carry balance. Between the living and the dead, between truth and lie, between motion and meaning. And still, you smile, because deep down, you know something no one else does. The world only moves forward when someone's willing to walk the line no one else dares cross. Your reputation begins to spread not just as the messenger of Olympus, but as something slipperier, subtler. The gods have many names for you now: trickster, negotiator, thief, diplomat. All of them are true. None of them are complete. You start to notice how others shift when you enter a room. Some smile, some frown, some hide things behind their backs. That's how you know you're gaining power not through brute force, not through spectacle, but through influence. You are now a variable no one can predict. Your tasks become stranger. You are sent to retrieve a dream that's gone missing from the mind of a Spartan prince. You find it lodged in a river bend, tangled in reeds and muttering in riddles. You carry it back not in your hands, but in your breath, letting it rest on your tongue until the right moment. You're sent to deliver an insult in the form of a compliment to hear it carefully worded, so she hears what Zeus wants her to hear, not what he actually means. You do this with a bow, a smile, and a perfectly timed pause. She doesn't thank you, but she doesn't smite you either. That's progress. You begin visiting the fates. Most gods don't. Most gods know better. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos sit apart from Olympus, neither feared nor revered, just known. Their weaving is constant, the loom like a heartbeat, threads twisting from moments into lifelines. You go not to change fate, but to watch it form. You're fascinated by how even gods are bound by what they spin. Sometimes you speak, sometimes they answer. One day, Atropos ancient and silent glances at your hands and mutters, "Not yours yet." You don't ask what she means. Some truths only weaken when explained. Your errands take you farther and now beyond Olympus, beyond Greece, into realms where your name is not yet feared, but quickly learned. In the lands of the north, you meet Odin, who eyes your sandals and asks what price they cost. In Egypt, you walk alongside Thoth, comparing notes on language, trickery, and which mortals are the most entertaining. You realize, slowly, that the gods of other lands are not so different. They, too, wear masks. They, too, spin stories. They just wear different cloaks, but it's back on Olympus that things shift again. One afternoon, as the clouds drift lazily across the marble courtyards, Artemis approaches you. She does not enjoy small talk, nor does she tolerate deception. That she approaches at all is a signal. She's heard whispers that Apollo, her twin, is furious. Not at a mortal, not at a monster, but at you. You don't ask why, you already know. It's the cattle again. It's always the cattle. You visit Apollo not with apology, but with poetry. You bring him a song. Not just any melody, but one that mimics the hooves of those very animals he once lost, the rhythm of their walking, the sound of their breath, the creak of their ropes. You play it with your back turned, eyes fixed on the horizon. And when you finish, there is a long silence. Then, a single phrase. You remember everything, don't you? You don't answer. He doesn't need you to. There's a new edge to your relationship, one not of open rivalry, but of deep, mutual recognition. Apollo sees what others are starting to see. You are not simply the god of boundaries. You are the god of crossing them, and every line you cross leaves behind a question. What happens next? Historians still argue whether Hermes ever wanted power for its own sake, or simply enjoyed the freedom that came with being underestimated. Some say he rose through cunning alone. Others claim his wit was simply how he coped with the weight of the roles he was forced to carry. The truth, like most things with you, is probably somewhere in the middle. You return to your cave sometimes. The one where you were born. It hasn't changed. The moss still glows faintly near the entrance. The wind still coils through the stones. Maya is still there, quiet, patient, knowing more than she ever says. She doesn't ask what you've become. She sees it in your posture. The way your shoulders don't touch the ground anymore. The way you watch shadows more closely than light. You stay for a night, maybe two. And when you leave, she doesn't say goodbye. She simply nods. You step back into the world barefoot again, but never truly vulnerable, and you smile, because even though Olympus thinks it holds your name, your allegiance, your story, you know something they don't. You're still writing it, and you've only just begun. You travel now without paths. Roads are for mortals. You prefer edges of forests, of thoughts, of realms. The boundaries are where the interesting things hide. And lately, you've grown fascinated by the dreams of mortals, not just the ones that come at night, but the ones they carry through their days, hopes, schemes, quiet obsessions. You drift between them like mist, uninvited, but not unwelcome. You hear a merchant whisper a wish for a lucky voyage, a thief pray to escape unseen, a midwife murmur a plea for one more breath. You do not answer every prayer, but you listen, and sometimes listening is enough to tilt fate. Word of your presence spreads faster than your sandals can fly. Not all gods enjoy this. Athena begins watching you more closely, not with malice, but with concern. She sees potential in you, but potential can be dangerous when paired with a taste for disruption. She calls you to her temple one morning, where columns shimmer with clarity and owls perch like sentinels. She offers you tea. You suspect it's not really tea, but something brewed from knowledge itself. Still, you drink. You always drink. Her gaze is steady. You move between truths too easily, she says. Do you ever rest in one? You smile. Does anyone? That's not an answer, but it's enough. She lets you go, for now. You take that unease with you. It hangs from your shoulder like a pouch of half-truths. You understand what she's hinting at. The danger of becoming so flexible that you forget your shape. You remind yourself, you are Hermes. You are movement. You are not a lie. But the line between the two is thin, and lately, you find yourself walking it more often. A challenge presents itself unexpectedly. You are summoned not by Zeus, nor by Hera, but by a mortal. A philosopher, alone in his stone garden, calling not with incense or sacrifice, but with a question. His voice slips through time and space like a thread of golden doubt. If the gods are real, do they change, or do they merely reflect? You hear it, you feel it, and you answer not with words, but with presence. You step into his garden, barefoot on warm marble, and sit beside him. He does not look at you, he stares into a pool of still water. Do you ever wonder, he asks, if you're worshipped for what you are, or for what mortals need you to be? You don't reply, because honestly, you're wondering that too. That night, you dream for the first time in years. It's not a godly dream, no symbols, no omens. Just a memory, the sound of the lyre you made your first day. The one you gave to Apollo. You remember the feel of the tortoise shell, the way the strings hummed against your fingers. You remember being small, clever, proud. You wake with the echo of that first music in your chest, and something unsettles in you, not regret, but something close. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever truly believed in his own myths. Some claim he orchestrated them, bending every tale to his benefit. Others suggest he longed to be surprised, even by himself. The only thing they agree on is that he never stood still long enough for anyone to know the whole of him. You rise before dawn and walk across a river without ripples. You pass through a village that never existed but will one day be remembered. You pause at a threshold where two lovers argue over a letter you delivered months ago. You did not read it, you never do, but you feel its weight in the air, hope, folded in parchment. By noon, you are summoned by Hera. She has a task, a delicate one. A young demigod has broken an oath, and she wants him moved, not punished, not rewarded, simply removed from the path he's on. It's a subtle correction, the kind that mortals mistake for coincidence. You agree, not because you owe her, but because you're curious. You find the boy fishing beside a waterfall. He's humming, badly. You sit beside him and hand him a stone. Throw this in when the sun touches the water, you say. He blinks, confused. You don't explain. He does as told, and moments later, a fish leaps, not the one he expected, but the one that will change the course of his life. He smiles, you vanish, you return to Olympus, and no one asks what you did. That's the thing about being Hermes, you're never questioned. You're expected to do the job and disappear. But inside, you feel the quiet ache of consequence. You've altered a life, again. As the stars rise, you find yourself wandering not between realms, but within yourself. You climb to a ledge high above the clouds and sit with your knees pulled close. You try to remember who you were before you delivered your first message, before you stole that first cow, before you gave away music and traded it for silence. And you wonder, if you stopped moving, truly stopped, would Olympus still remember you? You hope not, because then you'd have finally become something predictable. And that would be unforgivable. You begin to notice that the gods are not just watching you, they are adjusting to you. Their tasks for you are no longer favors or errands. They are tests, subtle, complicated, wrapped in ambiguity, and layered with the kind of diplomacy that breaks lesser immortals. You aren't being asked to deliver messages anymore. You're being asked to carry intentions, to nudge events into motion, to leave fingerprints without leaving blame. Olympus, for all its divine theatrics, runs on implication, and lately, you've become fluent in it. One morning, you're summoned to the halls of Themis, goddess of divine law and sacred order. Her temple does not sing like Apollo's or bloom like Demeter's. It is still, heavy. It smells like marble dust and memory. She greets you without warmth, but not without respect. She knows what you are becoming. She tells you a mortal king is abusing hospitality, twisting sacred customs into tools of war. His crimes are not illegal in the mortal sense, but they fray the fabric of what Olympus has sworn to uphold. She cannot act directly. She needs a correction, quiet, elegant. You nod. You know exactly what she means. You descend into the mortal realm at dusk. The king's palace looms with arrogant symmetry, gilded columns and guard towers pretending to be protection, but built more for vanity. You are not seen as you enter. You are not supposed to be. You slip between shadows, through kitchens and ballrooms and armories that smell of fear disguised as ambition. You find the king not at war, but at dinner, laughing too loudly and chewing with the glee of someone who thinks they've already won. You don't strike. That's not your way. You simply remove something small, a token given to him by Athena long ago. It's nothing but a ring, but without it, he'll lose the next battle. And because he loses, he'll turn paranoid. Because he turns paranoid, his allies will leave. And because they leave, his kingdom will fall. No curses, no thunderbolts, just one gesture. That's how you prefer it. When you return to Olympus, Athena meets you in passing. She does not thank you, but she inclines her head just slightly. It is the first time she has done so. You file the moment away. Later, you are summoned by Dionysus. You expect chaos, wine, laughter. Instead, you find him alone, sober, his eyes too old for his face. He tells you, simply, mortals are dreaming too loudly again. Too brightly, they need to remember limits. He wants you to deliver a play. Not a scroll, a story, a tale whispered into the ear of a playwright who will wake confused and inspired. It will be performed in 3 moons' time, and it will unsettle an entire city. You ask what the message is, he replies. Let them see how close celebration is to destruction. It's the kind of assignment no other god would give you. And exactly the kind you were made for. That night, you whisper your lines into the sleeping mind of a man who sleeps too late and drinks too little. He wakes the next morning and writes feverishly, not knowing the words are not his own. 3 months later, the city watches the play in stunned silence. No applause, just realization, the kind of silence that stretches across a culture. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever tampered with mortal art. Some call it interference. Others call it guidance. A few believe he was the hidden hand behind every genre shift and literary awakening. But you know the truth. Sometimes, mortals need a mirror held up to their worst instincts, and you happen to have a steady hand. Time begins to feel strange. You are moving more frequently now, and not just between places. Between versions of yourself. There's the Hermes who laughs with Pan in the wilderness. The Hermes who debates with Athena at the edge of temples. The Hermes who walks barefoot through the dreams of mortal children and leaves feathers on their window sills. You are becoming many things, and yet, somehow, still whole. One evening, while watching the stars bend slightly above Olympus, you feel something behind you, not a presence, a pull. You turn to find Gaia not in her full form, not in her ancient vastness, but in a smaller shape, one more tolerable to behold. She says nothing at first, just watches you with the kind of gaze that stretches back to before language. Finally, she says, you move quickly. But the earth waits, you nod. You've always known this. Your flight is not rebellion. It's necessity. But it's good to be reminded that speed alone does not build legacy. As she fades, you whisper a promise not to slow down, but to notice more. The gods speak of legacy as if it is etched in stone, but yours is etched in motion. In glances exchanged, in truths never spoken aloud. In the footfall no one hears, but everyone feels. And tonight, as you lie back beneath the weight of stars that remember you better than most gods do, you finally let yourself wonder. If you stopped delivering for them, if you became something else entirely, would they try to stop you? Would they dare? You carry yourself now with the quiet precision of someone who knows every gesture is being studied. The gods have stopped calling you reckless. They've started calling you deliberate. And while you never asked for their approval, you understand the value of perception. Olympus has no elections, no formal throne disputes, but every feast, every mission, every glance exchanged across marble courtyards is a negotiation of power. You navigate it the way others navigate tides, adjusting your weight, your gaze, your silence, until the current flows your way. It is not deception. It is fluency. One morning, while descending toward the mortal world, you pass between realms with the grace of a shadow that knows its place in light. You are not summoned this time. You choose to go. You have heard rumors, whispered from dream to dream, of a mortal woman who remembers everything she sees, not just 4 days, but forever. They say her memory is perfect, untouched by time or trauma. You want to know what that looks like. You want to meet someone who has never forgotten you. When you find her, she's sitting beside a stream, fingers stained with ink, writing names of people long dead in the margins of an old cloth book. She looks up before you speak. She knows who you are. She has seen you before, once in a dream she had as a child, and once when you passed her father on a road years ago. She remembers the exact angle of your jaw that day, the color of your sandals, the way your shadow stretched longer than your body. She does not ask why you've come. She simply offers you water. You drink, and for a moment, you taste your own memory, the sweetness of being born, the ache of your first lie, the laughter of Apollo the first time you sang. You ask her how it feels to carry so much without letting any of it slip. She says it's not pain, not entirely. It's more like noise, a chorus of truths singing at different tempos. Sometimes, she says, the oldest memories sing the loudest, simply because no one else is listening anymore. You sit with her until dusk, not speaking, not explaining yourself, just resting in the presence of someone who will never need reminding. When you leave, she doesn't say goodbye. She never says goodbye. She simply begins writing again. As you return to Olympus, something in you shifts. You begin to wonder if your talent for forgetting, your refusal to linger, to be pinned down, is not just a strategy, but a shield. Perhaps you glide across the surface of events, not because you are carefree, but because you know too well what lies in the depths. Perhaps your speed is not about freedom, perhaps it is about escape. Back in the clouds, the air feels heavier. The gods are restless again, though this time, it is not due to war or theft or mortal insolence. This time, they feel it to a slow stirring beneath reality, like the sea drawing breath before a storm. You hear it first in the laughter of children turning sour mid-play, in the dreams of shepherds that now taste of iron, in the way birds hesitate before flying west. You consult Iris, the rainbow messenger, whose pathways you occasionally borrow. She has noticed it too, a dimming in the colors of the world, a tightening in the seams between day and night. She says it's not a prophecy, not a curse, just a convergence. Something old, something forgotten, is remembering itself. And when it does, the gods will need to choose how they respond. Historians still argue whether Hermes was a prophet in his own right. Some insist he simply had better ears, that he listened more carefully, moved more attentively, understood the tremors in time that others ignored. Others claim he saw the future in reflections and acted as if it had already arrived. But the truth is simpler and stranger. You didn't predict events. You heard their whispers before they grew into words. That night, you walk among mortals as a shadow. You enter dreams not as a symbol or a warning, but as presence, subtle, familiar, almost comforting. You whisper not in words, but in feelings, caution, or remembrance. You do not want them afraid. You want them aware. You touch the dreams of kings and peasants alike. You leave behind feathers, not messages. By morning, you've walked the span of an empire, and though no one saw you, all of them feel slightly changed. Not frightened, just more attentive. You return to Olympus with dust on your feet and sleep in your eyes. You sleep beside the hearth in Hestia's hall, a rare moment of stillness, and she lets you. She places a cup of warm drink beside your head, and when you wake, it is cool but comforting. She doesn't speak, neither do you. She understands what most of them forget, that even messengers grow tired, that even gods who never stay in one place deserve somewhere quiet to return to. Before you leave, you etch a message into the steam rising from the cup. Watch the wines. She nods. She already is. And you, Hermes, wanderer of edge and center, begin to wonder if you finally reach the edge of something even you cannot cross without consequence. You move through the sky with less urgency now, not because your pace has slowed, but because something deeper has stilled. The wines know you, They carry your weight with a softness they reserve only for gods who travel more for observation than conquest. There's a change coming, you don't yet know its shape, only its momentum, and you are watching it arrive from every direction at once. Olympus is quiet on the surface. The temples still gleam, the muses still hum. The rituals continue as if repetition is protection. But underneath the rhythm of divine routine, you hear the tremble. It hums in the gaps between chants. It flickers behind Apollo's eyes. Even Zeus, who roars more often than he listens, has begun to pause mid-sentence, like someone trying to remember a detail that shouldn't have slipped. You begin noticing patterns repeating out of order. A nymph weeps for a god she hasn't met yet. A flame burns in a temple that hasn't been built. A mortal child wakes with the voice of an oracle and names stars that no one has discovered. Time is folding, not broken, just bending, like fabric held along at its edges. You walk along its crease like a tightrope. You feel the tension. You don't look down. You decide to visit the fates. No one visits the fates without a reason. And even then, few are welcomed, but you do not knock. You simply appear, stepping between the loom and the thread without disturbing either. The room is neither dark nor bright. It exists without weather, without air, without consequence. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos glance up, not startled, but vaguely annoyed. They do not fear you. They understand your presence the way they understand breath, necessary, but distracting. You do not ask for prophecy. You do not demand answers. You only ask a question. What happens if the thread remembers how it was spun? They do not reply. But you see Clotho's fingers tremble slightly before returning to their rhythm. That's enough. Historians still debate whether Hermes ever challenged the fates. Most say no, he was clever enough to avoid antagonizing power that could not be bartered with. But a few scrolls, half erased and misfiled, suggest otherwise. They hint at conversations never recorded, deals never spoken aloud, favors returned not with gratitude, but with silence. You prefer it that way. Stories are for mortals. You live in what happens between them. After leaving the fates, you slip into the mortal realm once more, not to intervene, but to observe. You watch a group of farmers pray to Demeter with offerings that look more like apologies than gifts. You see a sculptor carve a statue of Hera, so precise that even pigeons bow before it. You listen as a dying soldier calls out to a lover who never existed. Each moment hangs on a thin thread of belief. You can almost feel the gods above vibrating with the energy of those calls. And yet, fewer prayers are being answered lately. Not out of cruelty, out of uncertainty. The gods are waiting. But for what? You find yourself walking through an olive grove just outside a sleeping village. The moon casts shadows that move like thoughts. You pass under branches heavy with fruit, and for a moment, you remember what it was like to be a child among giants. Not yet divine, not yet shaped into expectation, just small, fast, curious. You wonder if time will ever loop back to that simplicity. Then you hear it, a voice not in words, but in tone, deep, old, familiar. It comes from beneath the earth. You kneel, you press your hand into the soil. Hades speaks without emerging. There's movement beneath the underworld, he says. Not souls, not gods, something older. Something we buried before memory. You don't ask what. You don't need to. The gods forget, so they can continue. But something has remembered, and now it is stirring. When you return to Olympus, you bring no scrolls, no messages, only gravity. A kind of weight that the other gods feel before you even open your mouth. They gather not all, but enough to matter. You speak carefully, threading truth with suggestion. You don't cause panic, you cause awareness. You tell them only what they need to hear. The fabric of what holds everything together is being tested, and not by mortals, not by fate, but by memory. They do not laugh. Not even Ares. Athena speaks first. If it's memory, we can study it. Apollo, pale and restless, shakes his head. You can't study what doesn't want to be known. Hera narrows her eyes. Or perhaps someone among us has remembered something they shouldn't. That silence after her words is the kind that lasts a little too long. You say nothing, not because you're guilty, but because you're not certain what you've remembered either. The meeting ends without resolution. The gods return to their roles. But now, they glance over their shoulders. They double-check their altars. They leave offerings to themselves. And you return to the sky, traveling not in arcs, but in spirals. As if circling will reveal something the straight path hides. As if repetition might shake loose an answer. As you fly, you find yourself whispering the question again. What happens when the thread remembers how it was spun? The wind, for once, has no reply. You begin to sense that Olympus, once the unshakable axis of the divine, is no longer quite so firm beneath your feet. There's a tightness in the air, the kind that comes before lightning, though no storm clouds gather. Conversations end half a sentence too early. Glances stretch too long. And in the marble stillness of the halls, you hear footsteps that don't echo correctly. You do not speak of this. You listen. You watch. You wait, not because you are uncertain, but because your power has always come not from what you say, but from when you choose to speak. You drift toward Delphi, the seat of prophecy, hoping the Pythia might offer some clarity, even if veiled in riddles. The temple is quieter than usual. Pilgrims line the path, faces drawn, their questions wrapped in desperation rather than devotion. You bypass them, unseen, your feet skimming the stones that remember every prayer ever whispered. When you reach the inner chamber, the oracle is already waiting. She does not address you by name. She only speaks one line, her voice cracked but certain. When the road ends, the messenger must become the message. You don't ask her to explain. You bow slightly, though you outrank her, and leave. You understand. If the gods are the fixed stars, you've always been the comet blazing, brief and unbound. But now, even comets must choose a direction. As you walk the mountain path back into the wind, you feel it again, that pressure in the air. A folding, like something watching you through a mirror that doesn't exist yet. You stop beneath a tree shaped like a question mark and wait until the feeling fades, but it doesn't. Instead, the landscape shifts not violently, not obviously. Just enough. The trees are older. The air is heavier. You step forward and realize the world has bent slightly around you, as if time has taken a breath and held it. You are no longer in the now. You are in memory, not yours, not quite. You see a version of yourself younger, sharper, before the tricks, before the titles. You're holding a lyre you haven't yet invented, speaking to a goddess who doesn't exist anymore. Her face is made of twilight. Her voice sounds like the first story ever told. She says, even messengers leave footprints, and your younger self doesn't understand. You, watching now, do. This place is not a vision. It is a conversation the world is trying to remember. A dialogue between what was and what could have been. You turn to leave, but the path won't allow it. Instead, it guides you deeper, until you find yourself standing before a mirror. But this mirror doesn't reflect, it reminds. It shows you every message you never delivered, every truth you softened, every lie you let live because it was convenient. It does not accuse, it simply presents. You breathe. You choose not to look away. Historians still argue whether Hermes ever faced judgment. Not divine judgment, no one would dare, but something older, more internal. Some say he was too clever to feel guilt. Others whisper of a moment when he stopped running, just long enough to see who he had become. This is that moment. You stand in silence, not ashamed, not proud, just aware you are the god of thresholds. And now, you've reached one that can't be crossed without changing. When the mirror fades, you find yourself back in the grove. The sky has not moved. The wind picks up as if nothing happened. But you feel it, a recalibration, like something inside you just finished realigning. Back in Olympus, you do not speak of the memory world. You do not need to. The gods feel it too, though they pretend not to. Dionysus starts laughing too quickly. Here his gaze lingers too long on altars that haven't burned in years. Even Artemis leaves her forest for a day and says nothing when asked why. You start noticing odd things, mortals praying to forgotten names, statues crumbling into symbols you've never seen. And most strangely of all, the stars seem to realign slightly, their ancient patterns twitching in ways they shouldn't. You mention it once to Apollo, and he goes silent 4 hours afterward. You begin to wonder, what if Olympus isn't what you thought it was? What if this mountain isn't the center, but merely a balcony? What if the real message, the one you've been running from, is that you're no longer delivering messages, you are one. You sit alone beneath the sky, your winged sandals unlaced, your staff quiet beside you. You trace shapes into the dust, not words, not runes, just curves. Like the shape of the road you took to get here. Like the echo of the lyre. Like the question that has no mouth but still speaks. And for the first time in what feels like eternity, you stop trying to interpret. You just listen. The days grow heavier now. Not because time slows, but because everything it carries seems weighted with implication. You continue your wanderings, but each journey feels more layered, like walking through stories still being written. Olympus hums with tension, but not the kind born of rivalry or petty squabbles. It's something deeper, quieter, and far more dangerous, a shared recognition among the gods that they've passed the midpoint of a story they didn't know they were in. You see it in their eyes, that subtle searching, as if they're trying to remember where the script was last put down. You return to the boundary places, shorelines, cave mouths, crossroads, because those have always been yours. You are the god of in-betweens, of not quite here and not quite there. And now the whole world feels like it's caught between inhale and exhale. Mortals sense it too. Their prayers have changed in tone. Less begging, more bargaining. They offer not just fruit or flame, but stories. Old myths retold as if repetition might seal something back into silence. But memory doesn't work that way. You know that now. The more they tell, the more the forgotten wakes. You find yourself in Crete, wandering the remnants of a temple once sacred to a goddess who has no name anymore. The stones remember her, though. They hum beneath your feet. You kneel, press your palm to the earth, and for a moment, your heart beats out of sync with time. You see not the past, but a version of now where she never left. A world where she still reigns, where Olympus never rose, where messages were sung not by wind gods, but by wind and tide. You pull away, breathless, not because it scared you, but because it made a kind of sense. Later, beneath an olive tree older than any scroll, you begin to wonder, were the Olympians truly chosen? Or were they simply loudest, most persistent? You remember stories of titans, of monstrous things buried beneath rock, of goddesses who spun fate before names existed. You've always moved too fast to dwell on such questions, but now they start to stick. You visit Athena. She's sharpening a blade that hasn't been used in 100 years, though it gleams like it was forged this morning. You ask her, carefully, if she remembers the first war, the one before the mortals ever picked up a spear. She does not meet your eyes. She says, memory is a weapon if you let it be, and you know that means yes. She asks what you want. You say, I think something older than us is stirring. She replies, then we should make sure we're still standing when it arrives. You do not ask who he means. Not yet. Historians still debate whether Hermes ever sought alliances beyond his duties. Most agree he preferred neutrality, moving between sides like a breeze that favors no flower. But some texts, buried in temples forgotten even by snakes, hint at something else, a moment when the messenger stopped relaying and started choosing. You suspect that moment is now. You descend into the underworld again, but not to speak to Hades. This time, you walk its edges, the crumbling veins of old belief. Here lie the gods who didn't make it into myths, the fragments of faith too strange or gentle to survive conquest. They do not whisper, they wait. You leave small offerings, words, names, gestures, and feel them shift slightly, like statues sighing in their sleep. You do not ask them for power, you thank them for still existing. Even in silence, on your way back, you encounter a soul not meant to be there. It's a child barefoot, bewildered, clutching a wooden toy in one hand. She shouldn't be here. She isn't dead. Just lost in sleep too deep. You kneel, speak softly, guide her back to the border. Before she leaves, she asks your name. You tell her, and she says, "You feel like a story my grandmother told me." Then she vanishes. You sit by the riverbank, the one that divides dream from death, and begin to wonder if maybe that's what you are now, not just a god, not just a symbol, but a story being told to comfort the frightened. Not because you are harmless, but because you know how to speak without frightening. When you return to Olympus, the stars are shifting again, not visibly, not yet, but you feel it. The constellations rearranging, the sky recalibrating. The gods don't mention it, but they all look up more often. Poseidon has started walking inland, Demeter clutches seeds tighter. Even Zeus seems quieter, not afraid, just listening. You gather your tools, not weapons, not armor, but tokens. The caduceus that balances forces, the sandals that carry you where you're most needed. A pouch of offerings, a feather from an owl, a sprig of laurel, a coin once placed on a dead man's tongue. These are not for power, they are for memory. For stitching yourself into what comes next. You look at Olympus from a distance that no one else uses, not above, not below, but beside. And you see it clearly now, not as a kingdom, but as a habit. A story told so often that even the gods started believing it was the only one. You whisper into the wind, "Let's remember something older." And the wind answers, softly, "Go first." You descend once more, not out of obligation, not out of boredom, but because the earth calls to you now in a voice that sounds increasingly like your own. The mortal realm, long a place you slipped through like a breeze through shutters, has changed. Or perhaps it hasn't, and only your eyes have. You land in a market town, listed on any map, nestled between two hills that lean in like conspirators. The people here don't recognize you, not exactly, but they respect you instinctively. Like animals do a storm they can smell before they see. They call you a traveler, a word that means something different in every language. Some use it as a compliment, others as a warning. Here, it means something in between, someone who brings stories, and sometimes trouble. You smile at that. It's not wrong. You sit beside a fire in a crowded square, where storytellers gather to exchange tales for warm bread. You don't tell your own story, not yet, you listen. A man recites a fable about a fox who tricks the stars into falling. A child sings a song about a bridge that vanishes if you speak the truth while crossing. And an old woman, blind and nearly forgotten, whispers the names of gods who came before the gods. She says your name last not out of reverence, but as if it's the thread that ties the others together. The fire crackles, you stare into it and see not flame, but memory. Not yours, human memory, collective, cracked, vivid in the wrong places. You see how stories evolve, how they forget slowly, how repetition bleaches color, how fear edits endings, and how some truths, too sharp to hold, are simply replaced. You wonder how many of your own truths have been sanded smooth by retelling. Historians still argue whether Hermes encouraged mortal myth-making or merely tolerated it. Some suggest he nudged storytellers along, placing ideas like breadcrumbs, guiding tales in certain directions. Others claim he remained detached, a silent observer. But here, by this fire, you realize the answer isn't either-or. You are not separate from their stories, you are shaped by them. You rise quietly, not to leave, but to walk. The town stretches out in paths that weren't there a moment ago, as if the landscape itself is rearranging to keep you curious. You follow, because that's what you've always done. You are the god of movement, and movement now feels like memory in motion. You find yourself in a field dotted with standing stones. Each bears a carving, a symbol, a scene, a fragment of a language you don't quite recognize. You kneel at one, run your fingers across the groove of a spiral, and feel a pulse beneath the stone. Not magic, not divinity, memory, the kind that predates Olympus. The kind that hums like a forgotten lullaby buried in bone. You stay there longer than usual, just listening. The sky darkens, but you don't summon light. You've grown accustomed to shadow. It doesn't threaten you. It reminds you you're not always supposed to be seen. You think of your fellow gods, and how each of them defines their domain with permanence. Poseidon's oceans, Athena's logic, Apollo's clarity. But yours has always been motion, flux, transition. You're the moment between doors, the breath before the answer, the laugh between grief and acceptance. You start to realize that in a world growing more uncertain, your form of divinity may be the only one that adapts instead of resists. You walk back to the village, and the old woman is still there. She greets you by name again, this time with a question. Do you ever tire of being between things? You think about it. Then you answer, sometimes. But I never stop being part of them. She nods and falls asleep mid-blink. You cover her with your cloak. In the early morning, you find a child drawing in the dirt. He's sketching a symbol you saw once in a dream you never told anyone about. When he sees you watching, he shrugs. I saw it in my sleep, he says. It means safe. You believe him. You leave the town, just as the sun rises, and the road ahead glows faintly gold, as if dusted by the wings of something only half remembered. You don't fly this time. You walk, slowly, listening not to voices, but to rhythm, the way stones settle, the way wind loops around branches, the way even silence holds breath. You start to wonder if memory is not just what's stored, but what's constantly being remade. And you realize, with a strange kind of calm, that whatever is coming, this convergence of memory, myth, and divine unease, you are not afraid, because you were never meant to be static. You were meant to carry the changing thing forward. You continue moving north, drawn not by landmarks or destinations, but by a strange pressure in the air, like a silent question echoing beneath every step. The roads grow quieter, the skies duller, and yet each mile feels more alive with meaning than anything you've walked before. There are no temples out here, no cities clamoring for divine attention, and still, the landscape feels attentive, as if it's watching you, remembering you. You're no longer treading paths meant for gods, but following traces left behind by those who used to believe, without needing names for their beliefs. The wind here smells faintly of minerals and fallen leaves, and sometimes, when it brushes against your ear, you think it carries syllables too old to be spoken aloud. You pass through a wide plain where the soil bears signs of ancient burn marks, circular and deliberate, as though fire had once been invited rather than feared. There are no people here now, only the sense that they were once here in numbers, and left not from fear, but completion. You stop for a long moment and kneel, running your fingers across a patch of hardened earth. The grooves you feel aren't natural, they're carved into memory. A spiral, etched by hands that knew what it meant and trusted the earth to hold onto it long after they were gone. You've known many kinds of silence, the poised silence of Olympus before a storm, the arrogant hush of temples waiting for prayers, the thick stillness of the underworld where sound is swallowed as quickly as it's spoken. But this silence is different. It feels earned, it feels chosen, and you feel like an intruder in it, even as the breeze seems to welcome you deeper in. It's humbling in a way that not even Zeus's thunder could achieve, because it reminds you that divinity is not the peak of existence. Sometimes it's just another shape memory wears before it fades. Historians rarely speak of you visiting the far north. Most imagine you bound to warmer wines, olive groves, busy ports, and crowded markets. But you remember coming here before, once, in a form you no longer wear. Not a man, not a boy, not even wing, just motion, a ripple of thought that moved between cracks in the frost, watching as humans lit fires, not to worship, but to remember. They sang not to please gods, but to anchor themselves against forgetting. And somehow, that felt more sacred than any altar ever did. You keep walking, and soon a low hill rises before you, round like a burial mound, but untouched by stone or inscription. You approach it slowly, not with caution, but with reverence. At the top, wind scrapes the grass into flowing patterns, like lines on a palm. You lie down, letting the cold earth press against your back, and close your eyes not to sleep, but to listen. Beneath the soil, you feel it, stories sleeping like seeds. Some of them have your name in them, though not the name people know. They call you he who passes, the whisper in the frost, the first to leave and return. You like those names more. They sound honest, they sound like titles given, not taken. When you open your eyes again, the sky is pale grey, the kind of colour that doesn't promise anything. No sun, no storm, just space. You sit up and look east. A narrow path, overgrown with winter grass, stretches out, barely visible. You don't need to see where it leads, you already know. The road to the temple of Mnemosyne is not found, it is remembered. The journey is not measured in distance, but in the quiet that grows inside you as you travel. Trees pass without notice, rivers do not speak. The birds here sing melodies that loop back on themselves, like lullabies designed to prevent waking. Eventually, the forest breaks open, not into a clearing, but into a moment of space in time where you recognize the feeling of arrival long before you recognize the place. You step forward, the world exhales, and the temple is there. It does not look like a temple. There are no columns, no marble, no flames in waiting. Just a low structure made of woven branches and damp stone, as if memory itself had chosen the shape it wanted. You duck inside. The air is warmer here, rich with the scent of moss and something sweetly metallic, like blood that dried in another life. In the center stands a figure tall, still, and shining softly as though made from the pause between waking and dreaming. She does not turn as you enter. She does not need to. Mnemosyne. She is not a goddess in the way Athena is. She doesn't carry strategy in her bones or thunder in her voice. She is the shape of recollection, the ache of something almost grasped. You approach without ceremony. You bow without instruction. And she speaks without words. Your memories unravel, not in pain, but in relief. They pour out like water from a too full jar. You remember things you didn't know you'd lost, fragments of lives you've brushed against, prayers half heard, faces never named. You remember what it felt like to walk before time, before roles, before expectations pinned you to a job. And you remember why you took the job in the first place. Because someone had to carry the moments between moments. Because someone had to make sure nothing fell through. You think of all the times you laughed too loudly, stole too easily, vanished too quickly. You think of all the things you distracted yourself from. And now, in this temple woven from memory, you sit with them, not to be judged, but simply to know. Mnemosyne raises one hand, and a single object appears, a small bronze coin, worn smooth by centuries of touch. You recognize it immediately. A token once placed beneath the tongue of a child who died too soon, carried to the underworld by your own hands. You had forgotten the weight of it. Now you feel it again. You understand. You leave the temple in silence, but not emptiness. Memory walks beside you now, not as burden, but as companion. You feel it in your footsteps, steady and soft, guiding you not back, but forward. The road ahead does not lead back to Olympus, not yet. You follow it through a landscape that feels less like geography and more like thought given form. Trees lean slightly toward you, not as if swayed by wind, but as if listening. The ground is soft, almost dreamlike beneath your feet, covered in moss that seems to hush even the sound of your footsteps. You are walking through a space between past and present, between the god's realm and the quiet persistence of the mortal world. And in this place, you start to notice the faint scent of ink and fire, not destruction, illumination. A library stands ahead, not constructed by mortal architects, but grown, shaped from living roots and stone. as if knowledge itself willed it into existence. It rises slowly into view as you approach a tangle of wooden beams, vines, and obsidian slabs carved with symbols older than the alphabet. No door marks its entrance. You pass through a gap in the wall where no barriers. Inside, the air is cool and dry. Scrolls and tablets rest in chaotic order, stacked not by category, but by memory. You move between shelves that curve like ribs, past parchment that hums when your hand nears, as if memory still resides within. Some scrolls glow faintly, others whisper unintelligible fragments of dreams. You realize this is not merely a storehouse of knowledge, but of divine recollection episodes, long severed from Olympus, too strange or embarrassing to keep above ground. You reach for a slab etched with fine lines of silver, and the moment your fingers brush its surface, a scene spills into your mind, a feast on Olympus, long ago, where the wine flowed faster than wisdom. You had played a joke that nearly collapsed diplomacy between two gods, disguising yourself as a servant and replacing sacred nectar with river water. The insult sparked chaos, but the laughter that followed was deeper than anger. It was the kind that comes when truth arrives disguised as mischief. Historians still debate whether you, Hermes, were ever truly loyal to Olympus or were simply amused by it. Some claim you served as its messenger, only to remain close enough to monitor its cracks. Others believe you were its pressure valve, releasing tension when it could no longer hold its own power. Here, among these unwritten recollections, you realize neither answer is wrong. You were never meant to uphold Olympus. You were meant to keep it moving. Further in, you find a section filled not with words, but with objects: a half-melted sandal, a lyre with 3 missing strings, a feather turned to stone. Each item radiates a quiet echo, and you begin to understand. These are relics not of mortals, but of forgotten versions of yourself. Pieces shed and left behind as you grew, shifted, played, and redefined your place. You crouch before the stone feather and remember a time when you tried to fly not on your own, but by mimicking someone else. It failed, of course, but even then, you smiled. You've always learned best from the fall. As you rise, you notice another presence, not threatening, not even clearly visible, but undeniable. A warmth beside you, like standing near a hearth not yet lit. It doesn't speak, you don't turn. But you know who it is, Apollo. You sense his presence like the echo of a song you once mocked. There is no accusation, no cold pride, only the tension that has always existed between you, light and motion, clarity and blur, truth and its delivery system. You don't greet him, he doesn't demand it. Instead, the two of you walk the aisles in mutual silence, sharing a path for once without conflict. Together you pause before a mirrored wall. It does not show your reflection, it reveals your influence. Below the surface, you see mortals whispering secrets that shaped kingdoms. You see scholars decoding dreams, doctors invoking your name as they traverse boundaries between body and soul. You even see a thief, her fingers nimble and precise, offering a quiet prayer to the only god she thinks would understand. Apollo breaks the silence not aloud, but in feeling. You've always walked ahead of the sun, the presence seems to say, but even shadows need light to be cast, and for once, you don't feel the need to outwit him. You nod, and your paths separate without resentment. As you exit the living library, the wind picks up, and this time, it carries no message. Just movement. You welcome it, letting it pull at your cloak like a friend tugging your sleeve. The world is not quieter now. It's louder in a different way. You hear the sound of your own becoming not as thunder or chorus, but as rhythm. The steady drum of feet on soil, the slow hum of recollection folding into wisdom. You carry no scroll, no artifact, no new prophecy, only understanding. You, Hermes, have never needed to be the loudest. Only the one who notices first, who moves first, who laughs last. And now, with memory settled in your bones and the echo of old rivalry warmed into respect, you feel closer to yourself than you have in centuries. You begin to walk again, not back to Olympus, but toward what comes next. You walk for what feels like a day and a year, time folding over itself, like parchment smoothed and creased again. The land begins to slope gently upward, the air thinning in a way that sharpens your senses. You are not climbing toward a peak, not exactly, but toward a threshold in the sky where the world of thought meets the edge of divine perception. You recognize the terrain in that quiet, bone-deep way you've come to trust. This is the plateau of all roads, a place known only to those who've walked in both mortal shoes and immortal sandals. It is not drawn on any map. It appears only when you've grown tired enough to stop asking for directions. Here, the wind doesn't push or pull. It lingers. It presses gently at your back like a breath waiting to be named. You slow your pace, because the earth itself seems to request it. The grass here grows in delicate patterns, tracing paths not of feet but of intent. You see the faint impressions of others who have come before Artemis in a line of precise, soft indentations, Dionysus in wild, meandering loops. You smile when you recognize your own, crisscrossed and unpredictable, darting between theirs like a clever child, weaving through adult conversation. At the center of the plateau sits a stone table, weathered and cracked but unbroken. Around it, 12 empty seats, an echo of the old councils, the loud declarations, the constant weighing of mortals like coins in a divine hand. You do not sit, not yet. You approach with deliberate pace, studying the way time has softened the table's edges and faded the names once carved into its stone. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, even Hestia's is here, though hers is only a faint whisper of letters now, as if she never wanted to be included to begin with. You rest your hand on the table's surface, and it feels warm not from the sun, but from memory. This is where choices were made, not always wisely, not always cleanly. But they were made, and you were part of them, even if your seat was often left unofficial, unmarked, unclaimed. The others debated laws and fates, while you translated silences, delivered uncomfortable truths, and disappeared before blame could catch up. There is something humbling about standing in the center of that echo, not regret, not pride, just stillness. You circle the table once, then twice, letting your fingers trace each seat. As you do, brief impressions spark against your skin: Athena's steely focus, Ares' thudding impatience, Aphrodite's shifting light. They are not present, but they are not gone. The gods are never where you expect them to be, and always exactly where you are most changed by their absence. You finally take a seat, not at your own place. There is no place marked Hermes, but at a gap between Apollo and Demeter. The space where no name was carved, only a spiral, a symbol of movement, of unending return. The view from the seat is strange. The horizon curves slightly, not as a trick of the eyes, but as a reminder. The world is not flat, not simple, not meant to be navigated in straight lines. You think of all the times you moved between places no one else dared travel, not just from heaven to earth, but from joy to grief, from mischief to meaning, from presence to absence. Historians sometimes claim Hermes was the god of travelers because you walk so often. But you've always known the truth. You were given that role because you never stayed. And yet, here you are, still. You close your eyes and listen, not for words, not for prayer, but for that subtle hum of presence that fills the space when no one speaks. You hear footsteps, not literal ones. The footprints of thought, ideas forming, gods remembering why they began. You open your eyes and find the table lit from below, as though the earth itself has chosen to illuminate this moment. Shadows stretch, not in menace, but as outlines of possibility. You speak not aloud, but through stillness, and something answers. You feel it more than hear it, the presence of the others. Not their physical forms, but their essences. Athena's logic, Hades' restraint, Hera's enduring vigilance. They do not arrive to challenge your correct. They arrive to witness. They understand now that you were never absent. Only in motion, you rise, and the table dims. Not extinguished, only rested. It will wait for the next gathering. Perhaps that will be decades from now, perhaps hours. In divine time, All things are always almost happening. As you turn to leave, the path reconfigures. Not because you've chosen a direction, but because the world responds to a choice already made. You are not returning to Olympus, not exactly, but you are heading toward it. Or rather, toward what Olympus might yet become. You are Hermes. And for the first time in an age, that feels less like a mask and more like a beginning. You descend from the plateau of all roads with the kind of quiet that can't be taught, only earned. There's no trail behind you, no footprints that last in the wine-scoured grass. The land closes up around your path, as if it was never there at all. But you feel it, every step behind you like a sentence already spoken, every breath ahead of you like the next line waiting to be shaped. You are no longer wandering for distraction. You're moving with intent. You're not bored anymore. Below, the landscape shifts again. Valleys open like sleeping mouths, their slopes painted in fading twilight. Mountains sit in the distance, more suggestion than obstacle, and the stars begin to peep through a deepening indigo sky. As you walk, you begin to recognize the edges of things, symbols of familiarity wrapped in new meaning. A broken olive tree growing alone in a field. A traveler's cairn balanced delicately by hands long since gone. A shallow pool that reflects not your face, but your oldest memories, blurred but insistent. The road bends gently, and before you stands a structure you almost forgot you built. A shrine, simple and low, made of piled stones, and a crooked beam across the top. You remember stacking it with mortal hands centuries ago, somewhere between a joke and a promise. You never consecrated it with flame. You just left it there and walked away, wondering if anyone would ever find it. They did, of course. Mortals always do. They left coins and figs, bits of bone, poems scrawled on bark. You kneel now before your own forgotten altar, and for once, you don't grin or roll your eyes. You just breathe. You just listen. Inside, it is quiet, perfectly so. Not the silence of emptiness, but of waiting. You place your hand on the lintel stone, and it warms to your touch. This is what you never told the others. This is what no myth remembers. You weren't just the god of transitions, you were the one who marked the passage and then stepped back, letting others believe they made the crossing alone. The guide who made his own footsteps disappear. You remember the first mortal soul you ever ferried. Not the name or the face, but the weight, the way their fear melted into wonder halfway through the journey. You remember the child who asked if you could stay with them, just until the gates. You said yes. You always said yes. That's the part no one wrote down. That's the part that mattered most. Historians still argue whether Hermes was a trickster or a teacher, a thief or a priest. They forget that sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is carry someone through change. Not to fix it, not to explain it, just to keep them moving, one breath at a time. You rise slowly, joints a little stiff, not from age, but from memory. The stars above are brighter now, clear and close, like coins scattered across black velvet. You pick up a pebble and toss it skyward. It doesn't rise far, but for a moment, it feels like you've added something to the constellations, something small, something yours. And so, you begin your final walk, not to Olympus, not to the underworld, just forward, past the stories people told about you, past the versions of yourself you once wore like costumes, past the laughter and lies and lonely errands. You carry no staff, no winged sandals, no caduceus, just the shape of who you are now, the messenger who finally heard his own message, the one who never belonged to any one place, because you always belonged between them. There will be new prayers whispered in the dark, new crossroads where offerings appear, new stories, some true, some wildly off, and you'll smile at all of them, because the point was never to be understood, only to be remembered. And now, you let go. You walk toward the horizon until the world folds behind you. The stars rise in sequence, and the quiet finally settles into your bones like a well-worn cloak. Now, with Hermes fading gently into the twilight, and the journey unwinding like the end of a long, strange dream, let your breath slow. Let your shoulders relax. There's no need to follow him further tonight. He'll keep walking. That's what he does. But you've done enough. You've heard the stories, traced the paths, felt the weight of memory and myth. The stars overhead aren't demanding. They just shine. The silence around you isn't empty. It's patient. You don't have to chase understanding. You don't have to unravel every thread. Just let them rest for now. Let them float. In this moment, the gods are quiet. The sky is wide and soft. And the world doesn't need anything from you except stillness. So close your eyes, if you haven't already. Let the gentle hum of the night carry you a little further into rest. Let yourself drift, knowing that the messenger God has carried you far tonight, and now you've arrived where you need to be. Sleep well.